Let's start at the very beginning. The most commonly given invitation by Jesus, over and over and over again. The same two simple words, but they were life-changing. They were these: follow me. Follow me. It's like what you just saw in that video. Jesus is saying, hey, come and follow me. I'm continually amazed at how often those of us who teach and preach somehow translate follow me into keep my commandments, as if that was the invitation that Jesus really gave. What I'm really interested in is that you toe the line and you do what I say. But that wasn't actually the invitation. The invitation wasn't follow my teachings. The invitation wasn't study my word. The invitation wasn't do what I say. The invitation wasn't even imitate me. Write this down in your notes somewhere, okay? The goal is that we would move beyond imitating Jesus. In other words, trying to act like Jesus, to being influenced by him. I'll come back to that later. But if we can move from imitating Jesus to actually being influenced by him, some really substantive things happen on the inside of us that make all the difference in our lives. So why would Jesus say, hey, come and follow me? Well, fortunately, we don't have to wonder because Jesus said it himself. This is the Christmas season. This is the time when we celebrate the fact that God in his son Jesus left heaven and came to earth. Why would he do that? Well, Jesus himself said, here in John chapter 10, Jesus said this, I have come. I left heaven. I came to earth. There is a Christmas season for one reason, and here's what it is. That they, who's the they? That's you and me. That's everyone in the entire world. Anyone can follow Jesus. He gives this invitation to all of us. He said, come and follow me so that you can have life and have it to the full. In my notes I wrote, Jesus' goal for me is that I would, and no offense to Kaiser, they stole this from Jesus. 2,000 years before Kaiser got a hold of it, Jesus said, I've come that you might live well and thrive. So how's that going to happen? Well, you move forward just a couple of chapters, and Jesus said, let's start at the foundation. What is it going to take for you and me to live well and thrive? And Jesus said it like this, I'm going to bring a new command. Now, before I read to you what that command was, some of us grew up in churches that were not short on commands. Am I right about that? Yeah, multiplication of commands. You know, I laugh and say, and I love the church I grew up in. My dad was the pastor. Loved God with all of his heart. But God bless him, he could come up with some commands, right? And so I laugh and say, I grew up in a church where we didn't have 10 commandments. We just had one. And you think that's great until you hear it. Thou shalt not anything. And that was pretty much how it came down. If it was fun, you couldn't do it. That's just how it rolled. Now, Jesus said, I'm bringing a new command. Just one. And here it is. That you love one another. And then he said, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. So if you're looking at the foundation, if we were building a house and the house was going to be a Christian life, okay? And so we're going to build this house. What's in the foundation? The foundation is one thing. And it is love as Jesus loved. Whatever that is, whatever that looks like. Which is why Jesus would say to you, come and follow me. And I will model for you what that love is. I will teach you about that love. And you'll get to see it right in front of your eyes. And here's the amazing thing. As you follow me, as you spend time with me, we'll come back to that principle in a little bit. But as you allow me to influence you, the amazing thing is you will begin loving each other as I love you. you won't be imitating me, you'll be influenced by me. So today, we're going to turn to a passage that the Apostle Paul wrote, because in this passage, Paul takes this concept of love and he deconstructs it, okay? He takes it all apart and he shows us the individual components that love is made of. And in the process, there are some wonderful things that we can learn. So our core Bible teaching is going to come from Colossians chapter 3. And here it is. Paul writes and says, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, don't you like being one of God's favorites? I love being one of God's favorites, especially when I realize he has 7 billion favorites. Yeah, he has enough love that every one of us is his favorite. Yeah, as God's chosen and dearly loved. There's some words in here that I've underlined because we can't possibly get into everything this passage teaches. But we're going to take a look at these 5 words because they're going to help us deconstruct love. And then hopefully learn how to partner with Christ so that it can be built and constructed back in our lives. So he says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. And then let the message of Christ dwell among you. What's the last word? Richly. That's how we're going to close today. We're going to come back to that word richly. So let's take those 5 words. Let's begin with that word clothe. I've noticed something interesting, and that is oftentimes you can tell what we identify with by the clothes that we wear. Now, it's no secret that Pastor Kevin is a Chicago Bears fan, right? No secret. I want to offer a significant improvement. A very significant improvement. Yep. Kevin, that's for you, buddy. You know, the Steelers are 9-2 right now. And the Bears are 3-8. They're going to be 3-9 after the Niners get done with them, right? However, in the interest of full disclosure, one of the 2 losses of the Pittsburgh Steelers is to the Chicago Bears. Unfortunately. You know what that proves? It proves we can lose to anyone. If you think about that, I just threw the Bears under the bus, but that's all right. You know something? There are causes that we identify with that are far more important than the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Chicago Bears. Some of you have a shirt like this that's about Sonoma Strong. Do you relate to that? It's a whole lot more important than the Steelers, right? Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've talked about clothing for a minute, I want to talk to you about why Paul would say, clothe yourselves. See, Paul wrote to a different audience than you and me. Paul wrote to a group of people that lived in the 1st century. And in that day and time, you didn't go to your closet and say, of the 75 outfits I have in here, I wonder which one I'm going to wear today. The average person had 1, maybe 2 outfits, period. Now that does some interesting things. That's not just about poverty. That's just the general populace. That's how everybody was. But here's how clothing, the purpose it served, besides just covering their bodies. A person became identified by their clothing. It was part of their ID. Now, even if you didn't grow up in church, if you're familiar with Hollywood or Broadway, they came up with a musical, I don't know, a couple decades ago, called Joseph and His Technicolored Dreamcoat, right? Yeah, big hit on Broadway, eventually became a movie and so forth, based on the story from the Bible of a young man whose name was Joseph, and he happened to be his father's favorite son, so his father made him a coat made out of many different colors. Now here's the amazing thing. Joseph didn't wear that coat just on Christmas and Easter and his birthday. It was his coat. It's what he wore every day. It's how people identified him when they saw him coming. Oh yeah, that's Joseph. I can tell from a long ways away. He's the only one who has a coat like that. So when Paul is saying to you and me, of all the outfits that you could put on, why don't you put on love? That's not what he's saying. What Paul is saying to you and me is that we would make love so much a part of our lives that that's the way people would ID us. It's the clothing that would set us apart from all the other people in the world. It would be our Christian uniform. Can I use that term? Wow, that gives a whole different meaning. Yeah. Jesus said the same thing. John chapter 13, here's what Jesus said. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. Does that sound like identification? It does. And that is if you have love one for another. Now I want you to think about this. I chose that Pittsburgh Steelers shirt because I identify with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I grew up in Iowa. There is no team in Iowa. You get to pick whatever you want, right? But here's what I'm pretty sure of. If you went to Pittsburgh and you looked up the Rooney family that actually owns the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you were to say to them, do you identify yourself with Pastor Ron out there in Petaluma, California? What do you think the answer would be? No. If he's a Steeler fan, he sounds like a nice guy. But they don't actually identify with me. The big question in life is not actually who do you identify yourself with. The big question in life is who or what do the people around you identify you with? That's a much more profound question. Jesus said, they will identify you as one of my disciples if you have this love that's unlike any other love that people will experience anywhere. And they'll get it. They'll get it. So, here's a mathematical formula for those of you who are analytical. And that is this. My PC equals my ID. PC does not stand for political correctness. Okay? What it does stand for is personal culture. You know, that's the part of you that you take with you everywhere you go. And the interesting thing is, people can sense your personal culture in the first 30 seconds of meeting you. They can sense if you're a kind, loving, gentle, patient person. They can sense if you're a driven person. They can sense if you're a selfish person. They can sense if you're a proud person. They can sense if you're an insecure person. They can sense if you're safe, if you're not safe. It's amazing how quickly we sense each other's personal culture, and it's also amazing how it's virtually impossible for us to hide who we really are. Now, what Paul is saying is make your personal culture your ID. Clothe yourselves with these things. So that's the first part. The second word that we're going to talk about is this. We're going to talk about humility. And I brought along a teaching prop for humility, and it's this. What is that? That's a level. Somebody said that's a child's level. No, that's a very good level. It's just not very long, all right? But it is a level. Did you know that your personal culture not only includes you, but it actually includes the ground around you? And humility is the thing inside you and me that enables us to level the ground around us. And before I teach you how that works, I want to say this. The reason that I underline humility and not compassion and gentleness and patience and kindness and those things is because if we were to do a study of humility from Scripture and in real life, you would find out that humility is the key that unlocks the door to all those other things. For instance, do you know anyone who is arrogant and gentle? No. No. And we could walk through that list. Humility is the thing that unlocks that door. Now, follow with me for just a minute. I believe Jesus was the most powerful person that ever lived, and I think he sits in a place unrivaled unless you know somebody else who raises people from the dead. Pretty sure he's in a class by himself. Okay? I believe Jesus was not only the most powerful person who ever lived, he was also the most perfect person who ever lived. If you're talking about somebody who was good, somebody who never did anything wrong, someone who never sinned, someone who was faultless, someone who always said the right thing and always did the right thing and always had the right attitude, Jesus is in a group all by himself. So he's the most powerful person and he's the best person that's ever lived. And the amazing thing about Jesus was he was so good at leveling the ground around him that the people around him never felt like he was better than they were. Friends, that's phenomenal. No one ever accused Jesus of a better than me attitude. And the amazing thing was, you could be a religious leader at the top of a religion. You could be a dirty, rotten scoundrel of a sinner. You could be rich as anybody. You could be poor and have nothing. You could be a man in a place of great power. You could be a woman or a child in their culture and powerless. You could be a free person. You could be a slave. It didn't make any difference. Somehow, when you came into the presence of Jesus, the ground was level. Yeah, because Jesus was humble to the core. Let me show you what this looks like in our lives, okay? I have a good friend, actually a relative, who was involved in an awful car accident. And in this car accident, she was T-boned on a highway. And it crushed her legs from the shin down, broke her pelvis, broke her collarbone, broke her shoulder blade. They didn't even count all the breaks in her body. It took them an hour and a half to cut her out of the car. She coded twice. They ended up life flighting her to a trauma center. When they got to the trauma center, they took her straight into surgery, and the surgeon started looking at her legs. There were so many breaks in her legs, they actually did not count them. The surgeon came out of surgery and he said, I would recommend that you take her legs off from the mid-shin down. Well, you can imagine what that did to my family. I mean, they were just hoping she would live. But boy, when you get the message that she needs to be a double amputee, all of a sudden you hear that differently. My family, as any family would, said, is there any chance that her legs could be saved? And the surgeon said, yes, there's a slight chance that her legs could be saved, but there are some very serious risks involved in that. Well, my family did not hear that. They just heard there's a slight chance her legs could be saved, and they began to advocate to save her legs. Bottom line is, in 25 days, 20 surgeries, surgery number 20, they took her legs off from the mid-shin down. Which means she went through probably 17 surgeries that she didn't have to. So I'm sitting with a good friend of mine who's a chief medical officer of a large hospital. And we were processing through all of this and grieving for our family member, for sure. And he said to me, you know what I would like to ask that original surgeon? It's the part I want you to get. He said, I would ask him 2 questions. Number 1, when you gave the family that message, were you standing or were you sitting? You know what he was talking about? He was talking about leveling the ground. Yeah. He said, the second thing I would ask is, were you between surgeries? In other words, were you in a hurry? Now, he's a medical doctor, my friend, and he said, you know, every time I go into a room, I never walk into a patient's room and stand. The first thing I do is I find a chair and I go sit right between the patient and the patient's family to where we can all be together. I let them stand, but I sit. I take all my motions, my hand gestures, everything, and I slow it to half speed. Because if there's anything I want that family to know, it's that I'm not in a hurry and I care. I tell you that story because I want you to know that when you're greeting a child, if you can get down on a child's level, it says something so totally different than if you just pat them on the back when they hug your leg. For those of you who are parents of grade schoolers and teenagers, Monica and I, when our kids were that age, when we really wanted to talk with our kids, we would wait until they were ready to go to bed and they went in and laid down on their bed and were reading a book or something, and we would go in and we would lie on the floor beside their bed, lower than them. Lights out. How you doing? Totally different response than when you stand over their bed. How you doing? Got it? Jesus did so many things that leveled the ground around him. Can I tell you that love, true love, has at its core humility that levels the ground. Let's go to the next word, and that is love. Okay? I brought a teaching prop for this too. Okay? This, my friends, is a cookie, all right? And I'm going to have so much fun because it's almost noon, all right? This is a cookie. This is not just any cookie. This is an Aloha cookie. Okay? Can I tell you that this cookie is the balanced and skillful combination of 13 different ingredients, which I'm going to lay out for you in a few minutes. Not the cookie, okay? The ingredients. And by the way, someone pointed out to me, you're no Jesus, because if you were Jesus, you would have actually multiplied this and given us all one. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I know. All right. But I want to talk to you about this thing, because here's the problem you and I have with love. We tend to look at love as sort of an ingredient all by itself. But Paul is telling us that's not what love is. So when you and I are cranky or whatever we are, and we think, I need to be more loving, we try to manufacture more love. That's like baking a cookie and you don't like how it tastes, and you say to yourself, I need to make this more cookie-ish. There is no such thing as a substance called cookie. Cookie is a combination of a number of other substances. And Paul is telling us about love when he deconstructs it for us. That's why he says in the middle of this passage that love binds these all together in perfect unity. A cookie is the binding together in perfect unity of the correct ingredients. It's the balanced and skillful combination of the correct ingredients. For instance, when I make a batch of these cookies, by the way, you could probably tell I like to bake cookies, right? You know how I like to bake cookies? Thank you. Because no one can rag on you for how many you eat. You made them, right? So, in this batch of cookie dough, there are 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, and there are 2.5 cups of flour. Now, what would happen if I decided, I don't think it's that big a deal. I'm going to put 1.5 teaspoons of flour and 2.5 cups of baking soda. Any takers? No, none. Because you and I both know that in order for a cookie to taste well, the ingredients have to be balanced. And by the way, when you're looking at love in your life, in order for your love to bless the people around you, your love has to be a balanced love, which is why it has to have the right proportions of all those components, all those ingredients, because love is actually the balanced combination of the right ingredients in me. But it's not only a balanced combination, it's the skillful combination of those ingredients. For instance, if you were to eat this cookie, you would find out that it has a soft, chewy center, and it has a little thin crust that goes on the top and the bottom, and is very light and fluffy. How does it get that way? Well, because when I put together the butter and the sugar, and then I add in the other wet ingredients, including the eggs, I beat it on high for 45 seconds, and then I let it rest for 3 minutes, and then I beat it on high for 45 seconds again, which is a long time, and then I let it rest for another 3 minutes, and then I beat it on high a third time for 45 seconds, and then I let it rest before I add any of the dry ingredients. And it literally changes the chemical composition of a cookie. Now, for those of you who like to bake cookies, there's a little hint, right? It's not just the balanced combination of the right ingredients, it's the balanced and skillful combination of the right ingredients. And that's the way love is in our lives. And that's why Paul said, when you do that correctly, love is this balanced and skillful combination that pulls all these together in perfect unity. Now, here's where you and I struggle. And that is, oftentimes we think, wow, that's really hard to do. So that's sort of all on me. Well, in the middle of this passage that has all these action words, Paul puts 2 words in there that are not active at all. They're completely passive. And twice he repeats this word, let. And the word let could be translated allow. So I simply went back and substituted the word allow for let in this passage so that you and I get a feeling for what it means. So Paul said, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Allow the peace of Christ to rule in your hearts. He doesn't say make it. He says allow it to. And he goes on to say, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. And then once more, allow the message of Christ to dwell among you richly. What does he mean by allow? Well, this is where we move from imitating Jesus to being influenced by him. You see, so much of following Christ is not us watching Jesus and go, okay, I'll try to do that too. And what did he just do? Okay, I'm going to try to do that over here. It's not imitating. It's actually being influenced. You ever have someone come into your life that you really enjoy being around, but they use a word or a phrase that bugs you? We've all had that, right? You know what bugs us even worse? When we find ourselves saying it later, right? And we've all had that experience. How does that happen? Can I tell you that influence changes us even when we don't want to be changed? It's so powerful. And that's what Paul is saying to us, and that's what Jesus is saying to us when he says, come and follow me. You know, Jesus had thousands of followers, but he was going to choose 12 that he was going to give a special opportunity to, because these 12 people were going to be the 12 original leaders of his church. And we know them as the 12 apostles. You know what his training program for them was? Well, he laid it out for us. Here it is. He said in Mark chapter 3, he appointed 12 that they might what? Be with him. You know what Jesus knew? If they hung out with him, it would change them. That's it. That's phenomenal. You see, the truth is, following Jesus changes me. When he says, hey, come and follow me. Get in line. Let's go do things. Let's interact with people. Come with me. Follow me. There's an amazing thing that when we follow Jesus, he influences us, and that changes us. But here's the interesting thing about following. The key principle in following is my proximity to Jesus. How close am I to him? How much do I hang out with him? It's pretty phenomenal. You see, most of the time we think following Jesus is on me. I got to imitate him. I got to get better at this. I got to act more like Jesus. I have to change myself to where I'm more like him. No, that's not his invitation. His invitation is come and follow me. Get close to me. Hang out with me. Be with me like the 12 were. Now, we could learn a lesson from the butterfly. There are 4 stages to a butterfly's life. And the first one is an egg. Okay? I have a simple question to ask you. How much work does a butterfly do in order for it to become an egg? None. So when the egg hatches, how much work does the butterfly do to hatch that egg? Well, at best, it nibbles on its shell. But if I were to ask you to eat this cookie, would you call that work? No, neither would I, all right? So when the little embryo in there starts eating the shell, that's not really work. It's not working really hard. It's just doing what comes natural. And then it hatches as a larva or as a caterpillar. Now, a caterpillar has one job, and then it is to eat everything in sight that's green. How much work is that? Again, I referenced the cookie. How much work is that? Not a whole lot of work for the caterpillar, just doing what caterpillars love to do. Okay? Now, at the end of the stage of being a caterpillar, the caterpillar does have a job. And the job is to manufacture this little puff ball of stuff that looks and feels a little bit like a spider web. It's sort of sticky. And it manufactures that, and it puts it on its back end, and it attaches it to the bottom of a twig or a leaf. And then the caterpillar just hangs there upside down. And waits. And waits. And waits. And God turns that little caterpillar into what we call a chrysalis or a pupa. And now the caterpillar's on the inside of that. And it just hangs out and hangs out and hangs out. And God changes it into a butterfly until one day that pupa breaks open and the butterfly emerges, lets its wings dry, and flits off. So how much work does a butterfly really do? Very little. And the truth is, if we would quit trying to change ourselves to imitate Jesus and just go hang out with him and be with him and let him influence us, we would be way more butterfly-ish. Got it? Yeah. That's why he says, let. Last of all, as we bring this to a close, I want to go back to the cookie, because the last thing that Paul says is, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly. And I'm going to tell you that when I live well and I thrive, I have layers of flavor in my life. Okay? So, if you were to take a bite of this cookie, the first thing that you would taste is the delicious combination of butter and sugar. Does that sound good? Butter and sugar is not only good, it's addictive. Okay? The next thing that you would taste is not only the combination of butter and sugar, but you would taste an overtone of vanilla. And if you want to up butter and sugar, just put vanilla with it, right? Now you have upped the flavor profile. But if you were to continue to munch on that bite, the next overtone that you would taste is a thing called butter flavoring. So if you want to up the combination of butter, sugar, and vanilla, put a little butter flavoring in there. And all of a sudden you have these warm overtones of butter. But about that time, your mouth would explode with the flavor of a semi-sweet chocolate chip. Yeah? Yes, I know. But wait, there's more. Okay? So if you kept biting, then you would notice, oh, there's that brilliant taste of a semi-sweet chocolate chip, but underneath that is the muted flavor of a white chocolate chip that's much richer and warmer in its flavor. And about that time, you would feel a crunch in your mouth, and you would go, oh, that's a macadamia nut. And if you kept tasting, you would feel another much more subtle crunch, and you would go, oh, that is toasted coconut. That, my friends, is an aloha cookie. Okay? Now, I want to tell you one other thing. Okay? Because when we have the balanced and skillful combination of the right ingredients, it produces layers of flavor that we call a flavor profile. Did you know in your personal culture that you carry around with you, it's possible for you to have a flavor profile that's rich? Which is why Paul said, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly. And here's the amazing thing. When people step into your personal culture, they take a bite of it. And when you take a bite of this cookie and you experience all those flavors, there's an amazing thing that your mind begins to do. It begins to repeat that flavor profile in what we commonly call an aftertaste, right? And so when the cookie is all done, you keep tasting the butter, the sugar, the vanilla, the butter flavoring, the macadamia nut, the toasted coconut, the white chocolate chips, the semi-sweet chocolate chips. You keep tasting those flavors over and over again, but every time you taste them in the aftertaste, they get a little less profound. Have you noticed that? And when they fade enough, you go look for the cookie jar again. You say, I got to have me some more of that. I need a flavor profile refresher. Yeah. Can I say this? Wouldn't it be wonderful if when people came into your presence, they had this wonderful explosion of the most beautiful flavors that they've ever experienced from another human being? They get the flavor of kindness and compassion and gentleness and humility and patience and peace and gratitude and forgiveness. And when they left, they had the aftertaste of every one of those repeating over and over again until they said, I need some more of that. I want to go be with them again. When Jesus says to you and me, hey, come and follow me, and I'll show you what to wear in this life. I will tell you about follow wear, what to clothe yourself with. This is his personal invitation to us. I have two prayers for us as we go. The first prayer is this, that those of us who have not made the choice to accept Jesus will do that today. Because all the stuff that we're talking about, you can't make it up on your own. It's part of following Jesus. So if you've never made that decision, I want to encourage you. I'm going to pray. You pray to God and tell him, hey, God, today I'm in. I begin my lifelong journey with Jesus today. And the second thing is this. For all of us, our Christian uniform, this thing that we wear, this personal culture, it could probably use some touching up in some places, don't you think? So this week, 3 times, go sit alone with Jesus and say, what part of me do we want to work on this week? And process it with him. It'll be different for every one of us, but it will be amazingly good. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for my friends who are here. Thank you so much that you have deconstructed love for us in a way. You put all the cookies on the bottom shelf, right there where we could get them. Everything that we could understand. And God, we're just so grateful that if we hang out with you, that we quit trying to imitate and act like you, and we actually become influenced and become as you are. For my friends this morning, Father, who are making the decision to follow you, God, would you speak to them in powerful ways this week, that this might be a great beginning to that journey. And for all the rest of us, would you help us to have wonderful times of connection with you? I bless you. Together we bless you. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.